My dear YouTube friends, as requested by many of my colleagues as well as researchers, today I would like to speak on the importance of review of literature in research as well as how it should be done in order to make it a meaningful part of our research document. Let me begin with the simple question. What is research? As known to all of us, research is a process. Research is a study, is an analysis undertaken with an aim to discover or find out something new, something that which has not already been done, something that which has not already been discovered or invented. So research, as insisted by great scholars, must be of high quality. If we cannot conduct research of high quality, we need not undertake any research at all. Because if our research is substandard, if our research is not original, if our research is not genuine, our performance in research will spoil not just our reputation but also the reputation of the institutions we belong to and ultimately the reputation of the entire nation. So once you have decided to undertake some research, either in science or technology or arts or humanities, you must understand that research is or must be a systematic investigation. You must know that research begins with the formation of hypotheses. Hypotheses in the field of science, engineering, technology, medicine, and wherever the research is empirical. But in the field of arts, humanities, and social sciences, usually we don't use the word hypothesis. The word we use is thesis. A thesis is nothing but an argument. And the researcher presents his thesis statement somewhere in the introductory chapter, and the entire thesis revolves around the thesis statement made in the introductory chapter. So after having formulated either hypothesis or a thesis, the researcher must gather sincerely all the data, all the details, all the resources he needs for his research. And once the resources are collected, his responsibility is to sort all the data, systematically, analyze them, evaluate them, and finally arrive at a meaningful conclusion based on the systematic investigation, and this is research. So in this process of conducting some kind of meritorious research, review of literature forms an important component. I could also boldly say that review of literature is one of the greatest, one of the most important elements of any kind of research. But what we find in the field of research is that most of the researchers ignore the importance of the review of research. They don't give importance to review of literature. They take review of literature for granted. Even if they want to have a review of literature somewhere in the thesis, either in the introductory chapter or in the second chapter of the dissertation, they view review of literature as a mechanical exercise. And some of the serious researchers go through the sources that are related to the topic of research, but they think that review of literature means just presenting the summary of all the resources related to the topic of his or her research. But a meaningful review of literature is one where the researcher critically evaluates every one of the sources, probably books or journal articles. Only then he will be able to know the relevance as well as the importance of the literature existing on a particular topic or in a particular area of research. Now the question is, what is the importance of review of literature? How is review of literature useful to the researcher? Review of literature helps the researcher to familiarize himself with all the works that have been undertaken on a particular topic so far. Simply speaking, review of literature helps the researcher to enrich his knowledge about the area in which he would like to specialize. And it's only through review of literature the researcher will be able to know what has been done and what remains to be done. He will be in a position to understand the research gap. Also, he will be able to know whether his topic is original, is not a duplication, is something which will contribute to the existing body of knowledge on the topic of his research. So, review of literature, this is my humble request, should not be taken for granted by the researchers. I could also tell you at this juncture that if somebody goes through the review of literature alone in your dissertation, he will be able to just judge the standard of the merit of your research. That much importance must be given to the review of literature. So how should the review of literature should be done? It's a very simple process. What we require on the part of the researcher is at most sincerity, motivation, involvement, dedication. If the researcher is not motivated, he will not be able to learn anything new. He will not be able to contribute anything new to the existing body of knowledge. So the first step in the review of literature is to identify the resources, identify the books, identify all the journal articles that are directly or indirectly related to the topic of his research. And once he is able to make an inventory of all the works related to his research, he must critically evaluate every one of the works in order to know the authenticity, in order to know the quality of research conducted by others so far. This is important because the researcher is not supposed to waste his time on substandard researches conducted so far. So the question here is, how could this be done? It's very simple. The researcher has to go through the abstract of every one of the past researchers. So just by carefully examining the abstract of the past researchers, he will be able to know the relevance of the research as well as the importance of research as well as the quality of research conducted by others. So if he thinks that the research of a particular person is of high quality, if he concludes that a particular research is directly related to the research he would like to conduct, and he has to keep it aside for review of literature, and he has to throw the other works into dustbin as useless. Okay. And once the works to be reviewed are chosen by the researcher, what he has to do is to read every one of the works carefully, with utmost dedication, with an interest or with unquenchable thirst for knowledge, with an interest to know what has been done so far. Okay. This alone will help the researcher to come out with a wonderful review of literature, which will certainly be appreciated by great scholars. So when you read the resources, when you make a survey of the past works, what you have to do is to critically evaluate every one of the works. So what is the hypothesis? What is the finding? Is it relevant today? And is it something which can be disproved today? So all these questions must be raised by the researcher when he goes through every one of the works undertaken by the researchers in the past on a particular topic. So after having carefully read and also evaluated all the sources, the researcher has to summarize the works in his own language. Now I tell you this because in many cases, review of literature is not written by the researcher concerned. Review of literature is something which has been downloaded from the websites. And this is of no use to the researcher because the researcher will not be able to know, will not be able to learn anything new from the works he is supposed to read and critically evaluate. So avoid downloading review of literature from the websites. You have to go through. It's your responsibility as a researcher to go through every one of the resources and summarize the content, the central idea, the hypothesis, as well as the findings of every one of the researchers undertaken in the past. Now, last but not least, so after having reviewed, after having made a wonderful survey of the past works, you will arrange them either chronologically or thematically, and this is left to the researcher concerned. He has to decide. And here I would like to conclude by referring to the importance of language, because whatever you read, whatever you critically evaluate has to be presented in the English language. Hence, you must give much importance to the language you use to present your ideas. And as advocated by many scholars as well as linguists, use the active voice, not the passive voice. Active voice is allowed. You don't have to use the passive voice in your review of literature. Secondly, You must make sure that your summary of every one of the works you have reviewed is as brief as possible, but without omitting any one of the important ideas in the work. Secondly, you must be very careful in the choice of words as well as structures. I tell you this because if your communication skills are poor, I don't think you will be able to summarize your survey of literature. And if your communication is a failure, if you are not able to present your ideas, your critical evaluation in a wonderful language, I don't think you will be able to impress on your readers, even if you are a very great, very popular researcher. So once you register yourselves for doctoral research, what you have to do is to give importance not only to your research but also to your skills of the language. If your language is poor, if your communication skills are poor, you should take efforts to improve your communication skills so that after 3 years or after 4 years, when you complete your research, you will be in a position to present your ideas without grammatical errors. I hope this introduction to the importance as well as the process of conducting the review of literature will be useful to my colleagues as well as researchers across the country. Thank you very much.